Dear Mr. Fortescue, please explain my absurd little puzzle. One can't help believing gentlemen with Roman noses, even if one meets them in omnibuses." Mr. Hilbery here interposed so far as Denham was concerned, and talked a great deal of sense about the solicitor's profession, and the changes which he had seen in his lifetime. Indeed, Denham properly fell to his lot, owing to the fact that an article by Denham upon some legal matter, published by Mr. Hilbery in his Review, had brought them acquainted. But when a moment later Mrs. Sutton Bailey was announced, he turned to her, and Mr. Denham found himself sitting silent, rejecting possible things to say, beside Katharine, who was silent too. Being much about the same age and both under 30, they were prohibited from the use of a great many convenient phrases which launched conversation into smooth waters. They were further silenced by Katharine's rather malicious determination not to help this young man, in whose upright and resolute bearing she detected something hostile to her surroundings by any of the usual feminine amenities. They therefore sat silent, Denham controlling his desire to say something abrupt and explosive, which should shock her into life. But Mrs. Hilbery was immediately sensitive to any silence in the drawing-room, as of a dumb note in a sonorous scale, and leaning across the table, she observed, in the curiously tentative, detached manner which always gave her phrases the likeness of butterflies flaunting from one sunny spot to the other, "Do you know, Mr. Denham, you remind me so much of dear Mr. Ruskin. Is it his tie, Katharine, or his hair, or the way he sits in his chair? Do tell me, Mr. Denham, are you an admirer of Ruskin? Someone the other day said to me, 'Oh no, we don't read Ruskin, Mrs. Hilbery.' What do you read, I wonder? For you can't spend all your time going up in aeroplanes and burrowing into the bowels of the earth." She looked benevolently at Denham, who said nothing articulate, and then at Katharine, who smiled but said nothing either, upon which Mrs. Hilbery seemed possessed by a brilliant idea, and exclaimed, "I'm sure Mr. Denham would like to see our things, Katharine. I'm sure he's not like that dreadful young man, Mr. Ponting, who told me that he considered it our duty to live exclusively in the present. After all, what is the present? Half of it's the past, and the better half, too, I should say," she added, turning to Mr. Fortescue. Denham rose, half meaning to go, and thinking that he had seen all that there was to see, but Katharine rose at the same moment, and saying, "Perhaps you'd like to see the pictures," led the way across the dining-room to a smaller room opening out of it. The smaller room was something like a chapel in a cathedral or a grotto in a cave, for the booming sound of the traffic in the distance suggested the soft surge of waters, and the oval mirrors with their silver surface were like deep pools trembling beneath starlight. But the comparison of a religious temple of some kind was the more apt of the two, for the little room was crowded with relics. As Katharine touched different spots, light sprang here and there, and revealed a square mass of red and gold books, and then a long skirt in blue and white paint lustrous behind glass, and then a mahogany writing table with its orderly equipment, and finally a picture above the table to which special illumination was accorded. When Katharine had touched these last lights, she stood back, as much as to say, "There!" Denham found himself looked upon by the eyes of the great poet Richard Alardyce, and suffered a little shock which would have led him, had he been wearing a hat, to remove it. The eyes looked at him out of the mellow pinks and yellows of the paint with divine friendliness which embraced him, and passed on to contemplate the entire world. The paint had so faded that very little but the beautiful large eyes were left, dark in the surrounding dimness. Katharine waited as though for him to receive a full impression, and then she said, "This is his writing table. He used this pen," and she lifted a quill pen and laid it down again. The writing table was splashed with old ink, and the pen disheveled in service. There lay the gigantic gold-rimmed spectacles ready to his hand, and beneath the table was a pair of large, worn slippers, one of which Katharine picked up, remarking, "I think my grandfather must have been at least twice as large as anyone is nowadays. This," she went on, as if she knew what she had to say,